Every choice builds character. On the Virtuosity podcast, we explore how to make every day a rep toward excellence. I'm Corey, your host and co-founder of Virtuosity. My journey into character development began in sport, where I discovered that strengthening my character didn't just improve my performance, it transformed my entire life. Since then, I've been gripped with understanding how we can intentionally build character to fuel both personal and professional success. At Virtuosity, we believe character is like a muscle. It needs consistent training. That's why we've built a research-based system that acts as your character gym, making character development practical, scalable, and accessible, even within the largest organizations. On this podcast, we sit down with participants from our flagship Virtuosity program, where individuals commit to a full year of daily character development powered by Virtuosity. Our guests will share why character matters to them, how they're applying it in their personal and professional lives, and the insights they've gained along the way. We hope these conversations challenge, inspire, and equip you with new ways to integrate character into your own journey. Subscribe to stay up to date with our weekly episodes, and if something resonates, share it with your friends and colleagues. Ready to start your own Virtuosity journey? Download the Virtuosity Character app or visit virtuositycharacter.ca to learn more. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 9th episode of the Virtuosity podcast. If you're new, I encourage you to check out our launch episode with Mary Crossan for a powerful introduction to this series. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Jennifer Bitz as our guest. After completing a science degree in chemistry at Queen's University, Jen quickly realized she would not be happy working in a lab with beakers. She needed to work with people. Jen pursued a career in the public service and found her way into leadership positions early on. She began observing and studying the impact of leaders on their employees and on their team's values and culture. This was meaningful to Jen because she believes our citizens can rightly expect our public institutions to do no harm and to perform at their best in service of society. When Jen discovered the research behind character leadership at the Ivy School of Business, this was her missing piece. She learned that the character of the leaders shapes the institution's culture. For just over a decade now, Jen has explored these concepts by leading character-driven culture transformation within 4 organizations. She has witnessed the direct link between character, culture, and performance. She is a certified practitioner of leader character, human systems, and pro-sci change management, and is currently pursuing accreditation as an executive coach at Royal Roads University. Jen, it's so exciting to have you here and to be talking about really your expertise that you bring in culture. It seems to be such a hot topic these days. And so, yeah, I'm excited to dig in, gain more insights for you, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Corey. So happy to be here.
So the question that I always start asking by all of our guests is, why does character matter to you?
Character matters to me because it's a language and a theory that helps me to make sense of being a human being. It allows me to understand what makes us tick, why we succeed or fail, why relationships thrive or fizzle, what's underneath the world's most intractable issues. And it is what distinguishes us as humans from machines.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's lovely. I feel like that could have been in a poem or something. Really nice. I definitely, that resonates with me too. And I think this idea of how character can really like decode what's going on with us and help us understand other people. It can be so powerful that way. And so you've been a big character champion for the last, how many years has it been since you've been in the area of character, by the way?
I think it's been 11 years.
Wow. Yeah. So it's been a long time. We'll get into the specific virtuosity practices later, but over the last 11 years, how have you found the impact of just focusing and working in the area of character? How has that impacted you in your life?
It has impacted me in a lot of ways. I think of work initially. I know we'll talk more about that later on. But I'll just say now that it has transformed my career. But also my own development. And of course, those two are closely connected. And because it's affected in a transformative way my own development, that has affected my leadership at work, my studies. I myself, it has contributed to me as a mother, as a daughter, as a partner, as an ex-wife, as a co-parent with my ex-husband, as a friend. And I've noticed that, you know, in our society we emphasize and it's really accepted that we would invest time and effort and money into our physical development, into our intellectual development, but that development of self, of our character, of the emotional, spiritual, the soul, who we are while we're going through all these other things in our lives, it's just as worthy of investment. So I'm a fan of Peter Senge's idea of personal mastery, and so just his idea of the that when we continually expand our ability to create the results in life that we truly seek, when we invest in our own development and our growth. So yeah, it's helped me to find a sense of purpose in life, a sense of of self-worth, helped me to see where I'm actually incompetent. And I know that's a strong word, but I, you know, embrace it. And maybe where, you know, I'm more ignorant, where I really need to grow, where I'm weaker, helped me to just be in continual learning mode. And to feel capable of facing difficult problems in relationships, like I was mentioning earlier, aiming to achieve what I would have thought as unachievable goals. And not just because I've learned about character-based leadership, but because I'm actually developing my character.
Yeah, that, like, not just learning about it, but developing it does take it to the next level. And I mean, I should have actually asked you, how has character not impacted your life? Because I feel like you just listed off pretty much everything imaginable and beyond, which I think is so true with character. Like, wherever you start, whatever purpose it's for, it just has these ripple effects in every other part of your life. And I really want to build on the last part that you're talking about, where character has really enabled you to do these really challenging things. And I think in particular in the work that you do, a lot of what you've been doing is around culture transformation, which I think people just think is an impossible job. Like, how can you really change culture? Is it possible? How do you do that? And so really keen to dig into your experiences there. You have a very long experience with this. So I'm hoping that you could actually just start by sharing with the listeners your story of all of the different experiences you've had. And then I'll follow up with some more kind of specific questions after we hear your story and experiences.
Okay. You just reminded me of one of my favorite sayings, which is, if you think something's impossible, don't interrupt the person who's doing it.
Yeah, that's good.
And absolutely, like you say, when my career first started shifting into leading culture change, I thought it was impossible, and I had many people tell me that it was too hard, and also kind of question my own career path. Like, why don't you just pick something simpler, right? But I was fortunate to have a few really wonderful mentors and a fantastic support system who helped me to see that it was possible and that I could do it. So I have worked now in leading culture change in 4 organizations, and they have ranged from about 1,000 people to 40,000, and then 2 in between. And I'm still learning. Still
hard to do.
Yeah, and in every organization, I've tried new things, I've learned new things, I've had successes and failures, and yeah, each one is a new adventure.
And so, yeah, do you want to share more about maybe what the aims were or the different experiences that you had in each of those organizations? What went well? What was difficult? Yeah, kind of give us the highlights of each of those four.
Sure. Um, the so it's easy to talk about what was difficult first. The organizations that the bigger they are, of course, the harder it is to just kind of on a day-to-day basis figure out, like, how am I going to change this like massive system? And it just becomes more and more important that you have a team, and that you have a a grassroots kind of movement going, in addition to maybe the formal things that you're able to do yourself or with your immediate team. Um, and yeah, the complexities of organizations in terms of their geographic dispersal across the country, and the kinds of external pressures on the organization, contexts within which they're working, the changes that occur externally and internally while you're undertaking the work. Yeah, those are all really big factors. Of course, myself as instrument, my ability to stay grounded, to stay in development, to stay open, and to bring as much strength of character as I can to the work. To work, I think of it as bringing my whole person to work, which Mary Crossan taught me, and was one of the reasons I first made the decision to pursue the work on organizational culture and to bring character into that, because it resonated so strongly with me. In terms of maybe the more of the opportunities and what has I've really been nourished by in these experiences, of course, the opportunities to know that that I'm making a difference within these organizations, and that affects the individuals and their well-being, as well as the performance of the organizations, which then, of course, affects Canadian society. So I believe that our organizations should not only avoid having negative impacts on society, but they in fact should contribute to solving the most wicked issues that we face. So it goes without saying to me, after this, many years working in this field, that how the organization operates on the inside will determine their performance on the outside. And so that has been a strong motivator for me, and it's been rewarding to see how how we really can change things. And the smaller organizations, in one case it felt like I was working in a high school. There's something really familiar and kind of fun about that. But I've enjoyed the challenges of, okay, really, how do we reach thousands of people? How can we leverage all of the leaders who may not be in formal positions but have the disposition to lead? There are so many within organizations, and they often are people who are leaders outside of work, whether it's their volunteer experience, or because they're parents and they're coaching their kids' teams. Maybe they have a whole other side hustle where they're a leader, and or they just really do haven't had the opportunity, but it's like water in a desert when you say, come with me. Let's make a difference here. So that's been, I found that really rewarding, being able to work with people who want to make a difference, and see how it affects them and the organization.
That's so interesting. And I had actually this idea of trying to find like these champions or leaders in various parts of the organizations that might not have a formal role. That sounds like a really powerful strategy. And I'm curious, are there more specific strategies in finding those people? Is it just kind of shouting out from the rooftops and seeing who comes, or are there other ways to find those people?
Yeah, I would say a combination. I've used the kind of formal putting the call out, right, and going through the hierarchy in order to recruit people. Um, when I've used that method, I've been sure to include a step where anyone showing interest needs to actually either talk to me or someone on the team or write something that shows kind of who they are and why they're interested, as opposed to, the proverbial being voluntold. Um, and I look for again that idea of, are they bringing their whole person to this? One of my favorite stories was when someone applied to be part of a grassroots network, and his application honestly was hilarious. It had my whole team laughing, and it was a little cheeky. Like, he was being a bit provocative, but I thought, this is the kind of person, who we want to work with, and I know is going to be able to influence others. And it turned out he was young and had tons of energy. He was a fantabulous, a fantastic member of our of what became our culture ambassador network. So then, as you say, though, yeah, so there's those formal routes, and then just like word of mouth is so popular, or is so powerful. And often it's just kind of finding that one person who is connected, and then saying go, and they can recruit others. I'm a big fan of there's this, just on YouTube, this fantastic video called The First Follower. And I'll just describe it quickly. It's a big crowd at a festival. It kind of looks like a Woodstock sort of scene outside on the grass. And one person gets up and starts dancing, and he's the lone nut.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else is sitting and they're just listening to the music, and this one guy is dancing, and he really does look like a nut. And then, and he's there alone for a while. And then eventually someone else gets up and starts dancing with him. And he's the first follower.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really neat about that, and why it's a powerful way to build a grassroots network, is that the lone nut, what they do in the video is they respond to the first follower. They start copying the dance moves of the first follower.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then very quickly the others start getting up and dancing. And within a couple of minutes in this video, the whole crowd is dancing. And so that's the philosophy that I've used.
That's really cool. I love that. And I think about, like, whether you're the lone nut or the first or the second follower, going back to your point about the character that it requires of those people, I'm curious to learn more about going into more detail about the character you felt like you've really had to activate as you navigate these spaces. And I can imagine, even coming from what I do, and I'm trying to really, push character and, in education and across different organizations, it takes tremendous amount of transcendence. I thought I already had a lot of transcendence, but I realized I need even more to be able to get people to understand what it is, like the vision and aspirations that we have. A lot of temperance, a lot of patience to know that things aren't going to happen right away. And I think people say that a lot, but you need so much more of it than I think that we're prepared to deal with. The humility too. I think a lot of times when people are questioning, like, why are you doing this? I don't necessarily see what you see. And being able to entertain those types of questions with a lot of humanity and compassion, and trying to see what others see when they don't see what you see right away. So those are just some of the examples of the things that I've experienced, but I'm curious to learn more about your experiences and the character dimensions you've really had to draw on to help you navigate this space.
First of all of those things, as you described for yourself, absolutely. I'll just take a quick look at the wheel and share with you what comes up for me in addition to what you've talked about. So one that of course comes up very quickly is resilience, right? That, like you alluded to, tenacity and resilience. Going back to that idea of how many people have told me it's impossible. and needing to connect with my optimism and creativity in order to see something else, something bigger, that that I believe is possible. One that I have really had to develop is intuition, which is an element of judgment, because with culture change, we're talking about, of course, it's our a human system, a system of human beings who are messy. As I was saying, they're not machines. They don't behave in necessarily predictable ways. And so if we only bring part of ourselves, meaning the more the analytical, the critical thinker, the sort of a pragmatic approach, then we can miss out on so much. And when I started tapping into that, to my intuition more, and trusting it, like just those little flutters or that, that gut instinct, and maybe an uneasy feeling, maybe an excited feeling, maybe even sometimes a sense of like that there's something bigger going on here. Like I don't know, and not dismissing it, right? Not ignoring it, saying, wait a second, all this is I need to be really tuning into this and listening to it. And I've had a fantastic team, my culture team that I've worked with for several years. We've been lucky enough to be able to work together in more than one organization in various kind of compositions, and we've really learned to hone that as a team, so that we'll share with each other what we're picking up on in the system, and not ignore it when someone else says, "Oh, I got an inkling of that as well." We know that there's something going on there. So, and that's, of course, connecting with people with their humanity, with their like the moods and the emotions that are running through the system. There's a lot of that we can miss out on if we just operate from our head. So that idea of connecting, of our judgment being informed by so much more, by the entire wheel, has really helped me in being, I think, effective in the work, or at least, having good days and some days when we make progress. Yeah. And then the last one I would say is vulnerability. And that, yeah, I thought I had that one kind of nailed years ago, but I just keep understanding it more deeply. And honestly, what I'm struggling, I still struggle with it. I absolutely see it as a strength. I know exactly why it's on the wheel. I know that it is an essential ingredient of humility. I see it. I see its power in organizations to build connection, to improve decision making when that real connection is there. Well, more than connection, trust. It's the trust that then allows for the best decisions to be made. So I've seen all of that in action, but it's still hard. It's still hard. It's there's something. Well, I think it goes back to my earlier, the story about the lone nut. There's something scary about being the lone nut, about being the one who's at the senior executive table talking about feelings, for example. Yeah, it's tough. Still working on it.
Well, funny that you bring that one up, because I feel like you really put yourself in positions to really shine a light on vulnerability. Like, essentially said, I want to lead the charge. Like, I want to be the lone nut on all of these things. And so you're definitely giving yourself the opportunity to strengthen that muscle. And so going back to the culture transformation piece, we hear often that having buy-in from the top is an essential piece to culture transformation. Would you agree with that? And if, and maybe going from there as well, if people are trying to start a culture transformation in their organizations and they don't have buy-in, what are some other ways that you might be able to start that culture transformation?
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, I would say first of all that that buy-in is incredibly helpful to have at the top of the organization. Our our top leaders set the tone, they set the example, they model the behaviors that we need. Well, hopefully the ones that we need, and they create ripples. And we know that the higher you are in the organization, the more of an impact you will have on the patterns of behavior, on the written and the unwritten rules of the organization. So leaders operate as though they're in a fishbowl. Everyone watches them very attentively, listens to them, and receives signals as to what's expected, what's appropriate, what's not allowed, what you can get away with, what you can't. Um, and so that's just the day to day how a leader shows up. But then there's also, if you're wanting to change the culture, then having their buy-in to make the investments that are necessary to dedicate the time, effort, money into that is extremely helpful. Their belief that the culture does determine the performance of the organization is, I would say critical. Otherwise, it becomes the nice to do, the when I have time for it,
Right.
which for senior executives, of course, when is their time? When's that, that rainy day when I'll get to the things that are on my non-priority list, right? So it needs to be up there. They need to see it as as just fundamental to their to the success of the organization. So what do you do if you don't have it? That's a good question. And what I have lived through is having it and then losing it, and then having it again. It's hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat that one. I did. I already talked about the power of the grassroots network, so I would point to that as being important, and that's why in the work that I've done, I've worked at both of those levels. So at the leadership level as well as at the grassroots level. There's also, if in working at the leadership level, of course, there's the potential to reach a critical mass of people in management roles who can influence those coming in, let's say when there's a leadership change. And the wonderful thing about character is that I think, as you know well, is that most people, when they come across it, they discover that it's a no-brainer, right? They that idea of, well, I can't, I'm not going to ignore this anymore. I've just, essentially found that missing piece. Of course, I want to use that piece, to put that piece in the puzzle. So that's, that has certainly been an important aspect of and why I have used character as part of the culture change work that I've done consistently.
That's such an important piece. And so when you've brought character into the culture transformation piece, there are, of course, different ways to do it. And we just had the culture article published with Mary and Bill, where we talk about kind of 3 steps: the awareness of what character is. So how do you bring the awareness of character across an entire organization to create that culture change? Then there's the development of character. So thinking about that more so perhaps from the bottom up, or maybe you're doing development at the leadership level so that it then kind of goes top down. But then also thinking about, as you're developing your character, you start to see the systems in the organization that might not be working for you anymore. So you're able to adapt those systems to better support the development of character and the culture that you're trying to aspire towards. What are some of the steps that you've taken? Do any of those sound like steps that you've taken, or are there different or more nuanced steps that you've taken to drive culture change?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, those all sound like excellent steps to take. I would say that haven't necessarily been sequential. And that, I think, one of the ways that I've had some success has been by being really adaptive. So ensuring that the organization that I'm in is being treated, of course, as its own living, breathing system that has its unique characteristics, mindsets, patterns of behavior, context, history, set of leaders, all of those things. So where do you jump in?
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be the same place in every organization. And again, the wonderful thing with character is that there isn't a wrong way to jump in, right? So I mean, I would say there's a tiny exception to that, which is that you don't necessarily want to start imposing or using character as a way to hire or promote when there's no awareness in the organization of what that is, right? That's just not fair to the people within the organization. But beyond that, there's so many ways to approach it. So one of the aspects that I have used in all 4 organizations is a diagnostic of the culture. And I have been able to incorporate character in, well, as you and your team, Corey, have been developing the research and deepening the research, I've been able to bring in character more and more to that process. And as I said, I've still more to learn and more to do with that. But that's a really important step in culture change, in my experience, really understanding what your starting point is. And the language of character is just incredibly powerful to use for that. I found that it can be really tempting if we remove character from the situation, and think organizations would typically kind of craft some kind of vision statement for their culture, something that they aspire to. And then identify the capabilities or the aspects of the culture, the values that they want to embody, and then they end up in situations where those things are incredibly hard to achieve because there isn't any acknowledgement of where are we now, and therefore what do we need to do to get there, and meaning, like, really, what are we capable of? Like, who do we have in this organization? How are we transacting in our day-to-day? What are the unwritten rules that are governing how we're working? Therefore, and what of those are serving us? What aren't serving us? What do we need to let go of? What do we need to be reinforcing? What habits do we need to be developing in order to generate the culture that we aspire to? And so now enter character. Well, now you've got this whole language around that, right? You're able to talk about the existing culture in a way that, for example, if you look to judgment being at the center, well, what does our judgment look like now as a whole organization at that zoomed out level? Do we have analysis paralysis? Do we keep spinning around the same issues? If we looked at the agendas of our committee meetings for the last several months or years, would we see the same issues and problems and risks coming up? Or at the other end of the spectrum, are we making rash decisions? Are we ending up with unintended consequences of decisions that haven't been well thought out and haven't been informed by a full spectrum of perspectives, ideas, voices at the table, and everything in between. But that you could see how applying a character assessment to the culture diagnostic brings a whole richness to it that then you can work from. Because then, of course, if we understand the culture to be a reflection of the character of the individuals within the system, well, now you can look to what kind of character development do we need? What does that actually look like for our individuals?
Yeah, I really like this idea of not just starting with a vision statement, but actually starting where we are with that diagnostic. And it's funny, I think a lot of organizations probably do miss that step when they're doing culture transformation. And yet there are a lot of people doing diagnostics, I think. But what happens next? And I think organizations love a good diagnostic. And so the idea, though, that you've been able to bring character into it as the action piece, well, this is what we can actually work on next to close the gap between where we are and the aspirational culture. I think that's just been the missing piece for so many organizations. And it's such an exciting part, I think, when organizations start to see, oh, we can actually change behavior and this is how we do it. It's exciting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when you think of it also in terms of the virtue vice model, that's where there's I got really excited because um, we're used to thinking of, for example, competencies. It's just the more the better, right? The more strategic you are, the more results oriented you are, the more ethical you are. But when you layer on the character model, then you see that actually it can't be too much of a good thing when it comes to character. So just picking up on that idea of ethical, which is an element of integrity. Integrity on overdrive, when it's in excess, can actually be quite unhealthy in an organization. If that's at that system level, it can look like rigidity, and and a lack of ability to really consider consequences, and yeah, to close off possibilities. So I found that idea of recognizing and then being able to kind of describe what's going on in the culture in ways of um, the needing to find that virtuous state for the character dimensions that's really helpful. And then, of course, an element of that that's important is that it's if we continue with the example of integrity, it's not that we want to have less integrity, right? That's not the strategy. It's what other dimensions of character do we need to be activating to underpin our strength in that area. So we don't want to be less principled or less ethical, but we may need to bring in a sense of social responsibility, a sense of compassion or accountability in order for that to manifest in a productive, healthy way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's been the downfall of so many large organizations where they really have overweighted without knowing it on some dimensions, like drive, the really classic one, courage, but that they don't have the humility, the humanity, the justice. And I mean, you look at like Enron, for example, where some people are ending up in jail because they didn't even know that they thought what they were doing was a good thing, and then it ends up being a bad thing. And so the whole character wheel really does help us keep everything in balance. And as you've been saying, like the culture really does support the performance piece. So I know you've also done a lot of work in executive leadership development, but before we go there, is there anything on the culture piece that we haven't covered that you'd like to share?
Well, the two are so closely connected, so you won't you won't be cutting me off from talking about culture anymore. But maybe I would just say that I have found that applying character to organizational practices in a deliberate way has been extremely helpful. So, for example, to equity, diversity, inclusion approaches, planning programs, change management, awards and recognition, of course, hiring and promotion, informal conflict management, found that a really interesting place to incorporate character. And then in the formal ways, so the code of conduct, the stated values and ethics, those kind of things, looking to character has been really helpful. And then, of course, using character to track progress as well. So if we think of each person as having their own character profile, and then we zoom out to see what that looks like at the system level, being able to assess the character there and see how that changes over time is really helpful. And that's an area that I'm going to be exploring more and more.
And when you talk about embedding character into all these different practices, how do you do that? Do you kind of just tap on the heads of the people that are leading, like hiring or recruitment or whatever, like, and see if you can kind of make the case for character and see if they're willing to embed it? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, good question. Well, I'd say first of all that that's again where the diagnostic of the culture is really helpful, because it if done well can really help as then as a guide for what's needed. And one of the things I didn't mention is that the process that I've used is to look for root cause. And often again, the language will be in character language, but the causes of any of the cultural issues that are happening in the organization are important to know and to articulate. And so design thinking really helps to get to that root cause level. And then from there, often it does not require a massive action plan. There are often really meaningful actions that can be taken that will have a sustainable impact when you're working at that root cause level, and at the level of recognizing it's the human beings operating within the system. It's not about the policies, and I mean, they can flow from there, but starting at that human level is so important. So um, from there, if the diagnostic is an honest reflection of where the organization is, and then with that uh, critical top leadership support for doing something about it,
Mhm.
then that's where I would kind of start to make connections with the enabling functions within the organization, developing those partnerships, and of course, trying to do that very early on so that nobody, feels left out, like that they've had a say in this whole process. They've been part of the diagnostic process as well, and then able to help with coming up with the solutions, alongside us, so that it's a team effort. And like I said, often it doesn't need to be these kind of big, elaborate, solutions. It can be something very simple, with respect to awards and recognition. Something that I think has come up in every organization is the fact that the formal awards from the top leader of the organization are rewarding behaviors that are actually not really desired, or that don't reflect the kind of full way that we want to be showing up. So, like you already mentioned, we tend to overweight on drive, and courage, and some form of accountability, but that can really look like lone rangers. And can look like people burning out in order to be high achievers. It could be even people being jerks in the process of doing something incredible. Is that really what we want to reward? Because those top awards are really important signals to the organization about what's valued, and about what they, like I said, they set the example. So just incorporating character into the criteria for the awards. It's really, it's not that complicated. But once you do see it as a lens in the criteria for all of the awards, well, now all of a sudden you're rewarding people. Not necessarily, they don't have to have that, that full strength of character. It's just that idea of being in development, of growing, and often those dimensions of character that tend to be underweighted in organizations, like humanity and humility and collaboration, temperance. Those are the ones that really need to be emphasized in what we're rewarding.
Well, I'm really glad I did ask that, because it's a really nice tangible example. And even just going back to the idea that if you use a diagnostic, it could actually point out some kind of pain points in the organization that just makes the case for why you would want to bring character into rewards and recognitions, for example. So that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
So, executive leadership development, you've been doing some work there. What have you been doing, and how have you brought character into that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just quickly mention a couple of things. So one is introducing character to the develop of managers throughout the organization. So that is a way of reaching a pretty broad group of managers and at different levels. So I do see that as being an important step. And but an important complement to that is the development at the very top level of the organization. So I have been fortunate to have had one experience where I was able to work with the top leadership team over the course of it. It was close to 4 years, where we would come together on about a monthly basis, and I would facilitate conversations with the senior executive team that had the intention of setting the example and modeling the desired culture for the organization through development of their character. And it was an adaptive process. And from 1 month to the next, I would kind of assess where we were in the organization in terms of the culture, what might be needed. I would also, of course, have direct conversations with the top leader about what they were noticing, what they needed, what they wanted from me. And then we would go in and there would be a bit of teaching, lots of dialogue, sometimes a lot of, there's some tough conversations. Sometimes, a lot of discomfort. It's hard stuff. But I think it was rewarding, certainly rewarding for me. One of the most interesting, challenging and exciting things I've done in my career. I a few of them told me afterwards that they were quite skeptical at first. They were like, "Who is this person? What is she talking about? Why do we have to spend time on this?" But they all came around eventually, and like even just simply the time spent on reflecting on the team, on how they were showing up, for each other. I think they eventually started to see that pay dividends when they then went to their committee meetings, or they went about their busy days and they had to make decisions together. They had to handle crises together. And they started seeing that positive impact. So it was. It took certainly a time commitment on the part of all of those leaders that was signaled by the top leader. And we just had to get the ball rolling. That was what I would say was kind of the initial challenge. But once the ball was rolling, it wasn't hard to keep it going. And we did assessments along the way to track their progress, which helped them to feel motivated. Like, okay, we are making progress here. We'll keep going.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And the time commitment piece always seems to be such a challenge, no matter who's doing development programs, and especially the more senior you get in organizations, those leaders, they just feel like they have no time. And I think that's a nice transition into the Virtuosity app that we've created. It's really trying to embed development more seamlessly into the time that we already have. And so I'd like to ask you 2 questions on the Virtuosity front. First, with your personal development, and then the opportunity you could see having in organizations. And so you've been using Virtuosity, I think, just for the last few months. How have you found that? What's the impact it's had in terms of how you see character development showing up in practice and the different impact it's had? And I think it's a particularly interesting question for you because you've been in the character space for 11 years, like you said. So is it really making a difference? What difference is it making? And what's the impact it's having?
It's having a huge difference, and like more than I expected, honestly. I just love the fact that it's like the habit formation part of it, right? The morning check-in and the evening check-in, just that these things at first, they kind of feel like a bit of a pain in the butt, and, it's hard to incorporate it into your routine. But then once you get rolling with it, it becomes comforting. It becomes an anchor in a good way, like okay, this is going to anchor my day. I don't want to start my day without, setting this intention and reflecting just, for 1 or 2 minutes. That's all it takes. And I don't want to end my day without having reflected. One of the parts I love about it is the reflection on my performance today, my interactions today, and my mood today. I've just found like how it's so useful as a way of kind of reflecting on, as I'm working on these different elements of my character, how is that actually affecting those aspects of my life? The other thing that I've learned from it is what I don't know. It was a lot more than I've expected. So, for example, I finally understand what magnanimous is. It took me a really long time, but actually, I've spent 3 weeks on just on being magnanimous, and that idea of it being generous of spirit, even with rivals, even with competitors, is finally really clicking. And so I've been kind of having fun. It's humbling, but having fun playing with that one. And there have been a few others too that I realized, oh, I did not understand it before. Because the elements of each of the dimensions, these are clearly, they're not just synonyms of each other, right? They're not just different ways of saying things. Like, they really are. There's something, unique and important about each of them. So I've enjoyed, being able to dig into each of them.
That's so amazing. And even as someone writing a lot of the content in there, I do find when you just sit with something for 3 or 4 weeks, it also just brings this whole meaning to you because of the things you're doing in the context, the relationships you have, the experiences you have. It takes on a very specific meaning to you. And I just feel like the words come alive so much more. So it's, this idea of just focusing on it in the micro moments of everything you do, just one element. Of course, you're thinking about the interconnectedness of the others, but that deep dive is, it's fun because I've heard some other participants say that, you just want to get around to all the elements. Like, you really only get to, 11 elements in the Virtuosity program. There's so much more to be explored. But that's the great thing, because character development is a lifetime process. And so you've got all the time in the world to explore all of those elements. And so when you do think about your experience in culture transformation or just being in organizations in general, do you see any opportunity of leveraging Virtuosity to make a difference for, especially bigger organizations, I think?
Yes, I certainly do. I think it's a really great tool that it immediately makes me, think about, wow, what an impact it could have. Like, for example, if, all of our members of parliament were to use it, or perhaps other leaders internationally. But maybe, with respect to organizations, I see a real return on investment of it. In terms of, as the members of the organization are developing their character, well, that is going to contribute to increased productivity for the organization. So there's that kind of, obvious metric there. And then there's also reducing the risk that's associated with, the risk and just the time and the cost associated with what we see when there's compromised character or when there's weak character in an organization. So I, of course, am often looking to that kind of data around, grievances and complaints and ethical breaches, misconduct, legal cases. All of that is so time consuming and resource consuming, and dispiriting too, for the people working on those things in organizations. So the potential for, just an app to be actually contributing to reducing those risks and the costs, I think is enormous. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah. Okay. So I am looking at the time, and for the listeners that don't see our time, we have gone way over our time, and we knew it was going to happen because there's so much to talk about in culture. But trying to wrap things up here, the last question I typically ask our guest is looking at the character quotient assessment. So the character quotient assessment, for those that don't know, is essentially looking at your kind of ability to make a difference in the world through character. So there's 10 questions. The first 4 around your awareness of character, the next 4 around the development of your character, and then the last 2 is about the application that you're bringing for character into organizations. And so would you be willing to share what you scored on the assessment, or different areas that you're proud of, or a particular perhaps question that you really want to work on?
My quotient, when I did it this time, was 83. So pretty good. I think because I am using character in lots of facets of my life, and participating in the Virtuosity program and using the app, I was able to score pretty highly. Yes, I am using a science-based approach. Yeah. I would say what I'm most proud of is the daily practice that I have now. I've had kind of was playing with it, of course, for many years. When I brush my teeth or when I make my coffee, I reflect on it, but it's a lot more consistent and deliberate now. So I'm proud of that. I would say my kind of challenge areas are the uh, like when you think about, ironically, at the within the system or my context, what happens to my character. So just being conscious of how the culture I'm in influences me, how pressure I'm under. I find like time crunches can be stressful for me, and I tend to withdraw sometimes from people when I'm feeling stressed, and so that's an area of growth for me that I'm going to keep working on.
I think that's got to be one of the toughest ones for a lot of people. A few other guests on the podcast have talked about that one in particular. I think that's the one that I've scored by far the lowest on as well. And it does show like the incredible strength of character we need to move through all the various challenging contexts. It's just got to be so strong. So yeah, it's a back to the lifelong journey piece. We'll keep chipping away at that one.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for coming on. I honestly feel like I could just pick your brain forever about culture transformation, because it does feel elusive. It does feel like, as we were talking about, this impossible task. But honestly, I feel like a lot of the ways that you've walked us through, like different kind of steps and strategies, it starts to break it down. It starts to feel more manageable. So I feel like I hope a lot of the listeners have started to see that it is not impossible, that there are steps people can take, and the central role that character can have in that, not only in embedding it into the change, but also who we need to be in terms of our character to make that change happen. And you illustrated that so well. So thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and coming onto the podcast with us today.
You're welcome, Corey. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You have just finished another episode from the Virtuosity podcast. If you have any questions and want to connect, please reach out to me at corey@virtuositycharacter.ca. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. As always, thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.